You're watching Global Insights, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. I'm Also Young. The human rights situation in Myanmar has deteriorated dramatically after a military coup in February last year. Over 1,000 people were killed by security forces and thousands opposing the military takeover have been detained, with startling reports of torture. More than 1 million people have had to leave their homes and now live in precarious conditions with no access to food, medical assistance and other basic services, while internal conflict and violence continue to endanger and even target civilians. But the world hasn't been paying enough attention. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, Thomas Andrews, was in Seoul last week, urging more leadership from the country, as well as the international community in general, to resolve the crisis of human rights and democracy in Myanmar. It's an honor to have you on our program. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you very much for focusing on this subject.
Well, it was an honor to have you in our country visiting Seoul and the city of Gwangju last week. So first, beginning with your trip to South Korea, you visited Gwangju, known for its democratic movement. And well, first, what were your thoughts as you wrapped up this trip?
Well, my thoughts was, number one, it was a very wonderful journey to Korea. And Gwangju was a particular highlight for me. It was quite amazing to visit the shrines and the cemetery that where so many young patriots of a free and democratic Korea lost their lives. And I was really taken back. As I walked the hallowed grounds of that cemetery, I looked in the faces of the photographs of those that were there before the grave sites, and they were almost all young people. And I thought about the fact that in Myanmar, it's in fact young people that are out front taking the lead of this movement to save democracy and human rights in Myanmar. And among those young people are young women who are out front. So I really was struck. In fact, when I saw some of the photographs of the military in Gwangju opening fire on those protesters, they were strikingly similar to the photographs from Myanmar, cities around the country, where the Myanmar military, the junta military, opened fire on these protesters. So there's a great deal in common in many ways between Myanmar and Korea, the people of Myanmar and Korea. But for me, one of the most profound and moving for me was the connection with those who did such great service for the country in Gwangju and those who lost their lives.
And of course, the Myanmar military junta, they've been cracking down on dissidents, people opposing this takeover that nobody wanted. And well, this month, they decided to release 6,000 political prisoners that were detained. But there still are thousands more in detention. And well, what is the current situation and how are they being treated?
Well, there are well over 10,000 political prisoners that remain behind bars in the country, in Myanmar, including the country's democratically elected president, as well as State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi. At least 86 of them are on death row. 4 of them have already been put to death this year, including a former member of the parliament. Conditions in these prisons are horrible by all accounts. Many are tortured, including children. We documented over 142 children who have been tortured, some brutally. And there are dozens of kids who are in prisons right now in Myanmar being held as hostage to try to force their parents, who are members of the opposition, to give themselves up. It's really a horrible situation.
And well, last year, when the military generals initially overthrew the democratically elected government, there was a lot of media attention back then globally, and then it slowly dissipated. And well, the junta's been continuing crackdowns on any resistance, as you mentioned. But well, right now, some are questioning why countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, they're not taking more significant action to help the people of Myanmar, despite, using billions of US taxpayers' money for Ukraine's resistance. And well, this really applies globally for all Western countries and developed democracies. But of course, well, there shouldn't be any real comparison between the two situations, but it does make you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'll tell you, the comparison with how the world responded to or has responded to the crisis in Ukraine, for example, is a really good one. First of all the people in Myanmar who I have spoken with have great empathy for the people of Ukraine. Indeed, some of the very types of weapons that are being used against the people of Ukraine are being used to attack the people of Myanmar. They come from the same source, Russia. So there's a great deal of sympathy and empathy within the communities, large and small, in Myanmar for the people of Ukraine. But while the people of Myanmar support the defense of Ukraine, they've been waiting, frankly, for more than 18 months for the world to take the kind of action to protect them and address their crisis that it took only a few days for them to take when it came to the crisis in Ukraine. A coalition of 28 like-minded nations, for example, including Korea, formed a powerful alliance to support the people of Ukraine. And this included imposing targeted economic sanctions on Russia and Russian financial institutions, freezing assets, and denying these institutions access to international banking system. This has been very effective, and it is precisely this type of support that the people of Myanmar need from the international community. They, that is the people of Myanmar, are imposing their own, what they call citizen sanctions by, for example, refusing to buy anything that's associated with the military junta. But they need the international community, including the United States and Korea, to support them, to work in coalition, just as they supported in coalition the people of Ukraine. And I need to add that this economic sanctions proposal that was overwhelmingly adopted by these 28 countries, this could be very effective, in my view, when it comes to Myanmar. The Myanmar junta prides itself in having a very large, very powerful military. And it is one of the largest in the region. There's no question about it. And it's the reason why they continue to terrorize the people of Myanmar. But the fact is, to maintain a large military with large numbers of troops, it costs money. To attack these villages and schools, as they have been doing with these helicopter gunships and these fighter jets scraping entire villages, it takes thousands and thousands of dollars to do that. So while it is a source of strength in the mind of the junta, it is also a vulnerability. And if we can target the greatest sources of vulnerability in terms of money flows into the pockets of the junta, then we can have a real solid chance of slowing them down and then stopping these assaults using this very powerful but very expensive military to attack the people of Myanmar.
So this strong international coalition, as you mentioned, is strongly needed for the people of Myanmar as well. But we're not seeing this kind of international cooperation or coordination, whatever word they're putting on it. And well, quite disturbingly, though, the junta has shown support for Moscow amid its invasion of Ukraine, and it's also been strengthening ties with Beijing. Now, what does this really mean for the people of Myanmar?
Well, it means that they need the support of the rest of the world. Listen, Min Aung Hlaing, who is the general, the senior general of the military junta, was in Moscow a month or so ago. And he had all kinds of praise for the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. He described him as bringing stability, that was his word, to the world, and is a very strong supporter of him. And of course, Russia, as I mentioned, a heavy supplier of weapons. China, the second largest source of weapons to the military junta. So they depend a great deal on these two countries and some others. What that means is that it is imperative that those countries who support the people of Myanmar and oppose these atrocities being committed against them need to work together in a way that we have yet to see, much like they did with respect to the crisis in Ukraine. And that's what I'm calling for, and that's what I hope that the United States, Korea, the UK, EU, and other countries will in fact do.
Well, and in a way, democracies, they kind of maybe try to evade this kind of responsibility by talking about what taxpayers pay about the electorate. And well, as long as the world really fails to respond to the situation in Myanmar, what implications will it have for the future of the liberal rule-based order that these democracies are supposed to be so, so intent on protecting?
Well, I'll tell you, if we don't respond in a much more effective and a much more coordinated way than the world has responded to this point, it will mean disaster. The Secretary General of the United Nations said just 2 weeks ago that in his view, the international response to the crisis in Myanmar has been a failure. Human rights, justice, democracy are just not givens. We have to work for them. We have to fight for them. We have to defend them. And those who are fighting for these values, like the people in Myanmar, they need to know that they're not alone in doing so, that there are people and nations who stand with them and for them. And this is our profound responsibility, because an assault on these values anywhere is an assault on these values everywhere. We all have a stake in the crisis in Myanmar and its outcome. And I think we owe it not only to the people of Myanmar, but to ourselves as people who believe in human rights and democracy to make that stand.
And well, for you personally, I think it must have been really just heartbreaking for you to watch the coalition government fall apart as it did last year, when you spent years and years trying to build this democracy in the country. So what were the last 2 years really like for you? And do you still have hope that democracy can be restored in the country?
Well, it's a very good question. It's been very, very difficult and very frustrating for me, as I see the world continuing to fail the people of Myanmar. But I want to tell you, I'm also just very, very inspired by the people of Myanmar and their tenacity, their courage, their commitment. I speak with hundreds and hundreds of people throughout the country in any given month. And it is just remarkable to me, their spirit, their commitment. They're going through an extraordinarily, extraordinarily difficult time. Entire villages are being wiped out. 38,000 homes have been burnt to the ground since this coup. I did a special report on how the coup and the post-coup period is impacting the children of Myanmar. And it's been just absolutely heartbreaking to see what the impact is on these families. But through it all, they are fighting. They have great tenacity and courage. They have very great creativity in how they're responding. So I am very, very frustrated by the response that we as a world have generated so far. But I am frankly deeply moved by the people of Myanmar and their tenacity and their spirit. It reminds me of the young people of Gwangju, quite frankly. And because of that, I have hope. I have hope for them and for the country.
Well, something that you said that really stuck with me, an attack on these values that we have: human rights, justice, democracy. An assault on it anywhere is an assault on it everywhere. And hopefully the world will pay more attention to what is happening, and really leaders will do all they can to really support these very brave people of Myanmar, who are an inspiration to everyone. And thank you so much for your time today. That was United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, Thomas Andrews. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Also, a big thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Global Insight airs Monday to Friday at 9:30 a.m. here in South Korea. Do tune in. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day wherever you are. Goodbye.